Hello and welcome to the Home Screen Podcast. This is episode 29, and today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. Rather than talking about an individual film, or game, or TV series, we're actually going to be talking about the London Film Festival. This happens every year in October, and I actually went 2 years ago for the very first time with my partner Charlotte. One of the films we saw was Kills the Flower Moon, which ended up being the first episode of this podcast, so it's a nice full circle moment. But this year I was very fortunate to have actually been given press accreditation for the festival. Essentially I got to go down to London for a week and just watch loads of amazing films. So this episode is going to be me kind of recapping my thoughts on all of them, I guess like a mini review for every film that I saw, a little bit of a ranking at the end, but we'll just see what happens. So the festival was from the 8th to the 19th of October, and then the week before that was a window for press and industry screenings only. I went down from the 5th to the 12th for 8 days, so I caught a little bit of the P&I window, and then 5 days the main festival. So as press, I was able to see essentially all the Gala films, like the big films, like the new Knives Out film, Wake Up Dead Man, Begonia, J. Kelly, stuff like that. We often got to see those films the morning of their Gala screenings, like the morning of their red carpet premieres at the Royal Festival Hall. And a handful of these films are now in cinema. Most will come out in the next few weeks, and some might not be released until the start of next year or even later. So while I was there, I managed to see 22 films. Of these, 8 were some of the big Gala films. The rest were a mixture of smaller films or films that haven't got distribution yet, or films that have had their premieres elsewhere, like a lot of stuff was already premiered at Cannes, like it was just an accident and sentimental value. Also, something that I wasn't really aware of until I was down in London is that on the second day of the festival, on the Thursday, they do a surprise film in the Royal Festival Hall. So I was fortunate enough to grab a ticket for that very last minute on Twitter, and that was amazing, so I'll be talking about that as well. So yeah, I guess I'll just jump into talking about all the films that I saw while I was there. We're going to go in chronological order, I think that makes the most sense. So the first film I saw was Train Dreams. This is a film about Robert, played by Joel Edgerton, who's a logger working on building the American railway system, dealing with love and loss amidst dramatic change at the start of the 20th century. I really, really liked this. I think this is a Netflix original film. I think it's coming to Netflix in November at some point soon. Yeah, I really thought it was amazing. It was pensive, intimate, beautifully crafted. I think it's one of the best life story films that I've seen. It really kind of covers the span of his life, particularly his kind of, I guess, the middle period of his life, but then you also do get to see it later on as well. Phenomenal performance by Joel Edgerton. He really is the linchpin. He really pins it all together. The first thought I had immediately was just a glimpse into hopefully a future one day where we might finally get to see a Red Dead Redemption film. If that is the case, he proves here, right there, right now, that he would be a phenomenal choice to cast as Arthur Morgan. Incredibly moving score. I was really impressed. So yeah, this comes on Netflix, I believe, in November, so go and check that out. Next film I saw was called The Blue Trail. This follows a Brazilian woman who must vacate her home and move away as part of a government incentive to relocate elderly people to help the economy. This didn't fully work for me, particularly some of the more quirky elements. I liked what it was going for, and I guess it is a real story of defiance, digging your heels and still standing for what's your own, even in your older age. There was some pretty funny parts, particularly with how stubborn she is, and overall it's still a good watch. It just wasn't quite my cup of tea. Next up, I watched The Sun and the Sea. This follows 2 friends called Jonah and Lee. They take a break from their London lives to escape to the northeast coast of Scotland, where they reconnect with family, meet new friends, and discover quite how therapeutic it can be living in a quiet rural community, especially along the coast. This was very real and very raw. I think it was a perfect showcase of what British independent cinema is capable of. It really tells this small story in quite a nuanced way. Amazing breakout performances all around, especially the guy who plays Jonah. It was very intimate, while also being very fun and fresh. I think this is a real good total balance. I also think it's quite a deep exploration of some themes, particularly men's mental health, male friendships, the need for escapism from society. It's a very real look at friendships and how they can be quite fickle at times, but if it's a good friendship, it will come back together in the end. I saw after the festival this started to get a little bit of attention for some awards, for some long lists, especially for the performances and the director. So hats off to them. I loved this and I'm really looking forward to seeing it soon. I don't imagine when this will have distribution, it might be next year, but keep an eye out for it because I strongly recommend The Sun and the Sea. Next up was the new installment in Rian Johnson's Knives Out trilogy now, I guess. It's called Wake Up Dead Man. This installment of the Knives Out universe sees Benoit Blanc investigating the murder of a Catholic priest, aided by Josh O'Connor's Reverend Judd. I think Rian Johnson is now 3 for 3. I think he's truly cracked the code in making some of the most compelling whodunits of all time. I thought this was the most complex and possibly most satisfying of the 3 capers so far, purely because it's more of a multi-layered mystery with multiple fake outs and conclusions of things without being too spoilery. It's a lot of fun. I still think the first movie is the tightest. I think it's very watertight, very bulletproof script. I think it works exceptionally well in pretty much every way, and I think this does too, even though this is a little bit more complex. And while I'm talking about this, Glass Onion was also great, but I think that it's between the first one and this one for being my personal favourite. I would probably lean towards this at the moment, but I would love to rewatch it when it comes to Netflix in a few weeks. Josh O'Connor is great in this. I think his earnestness and honesty is a perfect counterpart and pairing to Daniel Craig's usual wacky genius as Benoit Blanc. And I loved how the film explores faith in a really interesting way. Rather than just poking fun at it, I think there's quite a sincere and thoughtful approach, which is perfectly embodied through Josh O'Connor's character of Judd. I think this is probably one of the more mainstream appeal films that I watched. I think Knives Out at this point is becoming a household name, and with it going straight to Netflix, I believe in December, it'll be on everyone's TV during Christmas. So I believe this is probably on everyone's radar already, but if it's not, then definitely get ready to check out Wake Up Dead Man. After that, I watched Bad Apples. This features Saoirse Ronan as a young teacher who has to find a way of dealing with one particularly troublesome student, and things take a turn for the worse when she takes matters into her own hands. I'm going to leave it there for the sake of spoilers. I haven't seen the trailer for this, if there is a trailer, so I don't know how much is spoiled in the marketing, but yeah, this was a real surprise hit. I knew nothing going into it, and it was crazy. I think this got the most amount of laughs out of the audience of any film that I saw there. I think it's one of the best black comedies I've seen maybe ever. I really love how it keeps pushing the concept further and further, almost to and past the point of realism. I guess similar to The Sun and the Sea, it feels very modern. It's got some great comedic timing and sense of humour. Saoirse Ronan is an incredible actress. I think she's got 4 Oscar nominations now, but it feels like over the last few years especially, she's really been showing within British cinema how adept she is at different genres. Like The Outrun last year, more of a heavy drama, whereas this is definitely a black comedy with some dramatic elements in it, but definitely leans more in the camp of being comedy. She's got such a good range, and I'm looking forward to people seeing this one too. The next film I watched was Tête Brûlée. This is a community grieving following the loss of a young man, with his sister Aya at the forefront of the narrative, showing how she deals with her brother's loss. It's pretty powerful seeing a community rally together in grief like this. And it does a really good job of capturing that eerie, silent void that grief causes. I'm pretty sure most of the film, if not all the film, actually has no music apart from diegetic music. I also think the film, if I'm correct, was made honouring the director's brother, who sadly passed away. I think it's a great tribute of sorts while still exploring these themes. With the nature of it exploring grief, it is very slow, quite melancholic. I know this is something that I've said already quite a lot and probably will keep saying, but it does feel very human, feels very naturalistic, and it feels like a very real response to something like this happening, about family members and the community rallying around this family while also grieving themselves for their loss of their friend. Next up, I watched Ballad of a Small Player. This has Colin Farrell starring as Lord Doyle, a high-stakes gambler in Macau wrestling with his gambling addiction while trying to find ways to pay off his debtors. This is Edward Berger's next film following All Quiet on the Western Front and last year's Conclave. I thought this was a very mixed bag to me. I thought there was strong direction and great cinematography, which is to be expected from Edward Berger at this point, but I didn't think the story was as strong as his previous 2 renowned films. It's very loud in every sense of the word, and with the protagonist, Lord Doyle, I thought he was quite an unreliable protagonist in terms of his decision making. You can't quite know exactly what he's going to do, but I guess that kind of plays well into the gambler addict aspect of his personality. I found the score was very jarring. It was very stabby. Although as I was walking out of the cinema, I chatted to someone about this and they said that they loved the score. So it was quite an interesting grounds for discussion. It seemed to be quite a polarizing film. So yeah, this might be a bit of a divisive one, but overall I think it'll be moderately successful once it's released, and it's still worth checking out. After that, in a massive contrast, I watched The Voice of Hindrajab. This is based on a true story. It follows a team of emergency responders in their efforts to extract a 6-year-old girl trapped inside a car in Gaza whilst being shot at by the IDF forces. This uses a combination of actors while also using the real voice recordings of Hindrajab during this incident. This was a heavy watch. I'd go as far as to say that it's pretty radicalizing as to how awful this is. There's a quote, and I don't know where this originated from, I saw it on Twitter a few months ago, where it basically says that while art can be entertaining, it's also crucial for art to sometimes make you feel uncomfortable. And I think this fits that bill 100%. It's nothing short of harrowing watching this. I feel like this left everyone in the cinema feeling pretty numb afterwards. This is probably the least amount of conversation I had with people because it was a lot to process and take in. And it was quite hard to discuss because it felt so emotionally raw. I heard a little bit of interesting discussion online and in person about some saying how it could be seen as being slightly exploitative of the death of a poor young girl, while others saying that it is crucial watching and the film needs to speak for itself, and that this is kind of the capitulation of one case study of the atrocities that have happened in Palestine over the last year. So there's not really much more that I feel like mentioning about this point. As I said, just it really does speak for itself. I don't know where this will end up getting distributed. It might be something that goes straight to BFI Player. I don't know, but please do seek this out and watch it, because I think while it is a very hard watch, it's a very essential watch. Later that day, I watched The Fence. This sees a local village resident, played by Isaac de Bancol, who stands at the fencing of a work compound in Western Africa, demanding the body of his brother to be returned back to him after a work accident unfortunately killed him. This was my first Claire Denis film, so maybe this is just stylistically what she goes for in a lot of her films, but it just didn't feel great to me. But I thought there were still some pretty great performances, particularly from Tom Blythe and Mia McKenna-Bruce from How to Have Sex, but overall it was a bit too long and meandering for me personally. It definitely feels more like theatre than film, with how small the central cast is, how confined it is, the use of monologues. I'm sure this film will definitely have its audience. Fans of Claire Denis, I'm sure, were very used to this style. It was just a bit jarring for me. It wasn't my cup of tea. But hey, I'm sure other people will have really liked this. And after that, I ended up seeing the surprise film at the Royal Festival Hall. It was quite funny leading up to this, the amount of discussion around what it could be. Earlier in that week, Marty Supreme ended up being the surprise film at the New York Film Festival, having its premiere there. So there was a lot of hubbub and discussion about, will the surprise film here be Marty Supreme? Will it be Eleanor the Great? Could it be The Running Man? Could it even be Wicked for Good? It was really funny how this actually ended up being a genuine surprise. It was a film that no one mentioned, was on no one's radar, and it was a film called Tuner. This sees Nicky White, played by Leo Woodall, as a piano tuner with an acute sense of hearing, which he then realises could be extremely useful in other, less legal ways to earn money. This was an absolute banger, and it made the surprise even better. It's such a fun, fast, fresh film with some of the best editing and sound design in recent years. It's kind of like Baby Driver meets Sound of Metal in its use of synchronous editing, moves very quickly, feels very akin to Edgar Wright's style of editing. I'd love to see this even get nominated for those categories because I think it does such an amazing job. It's got a lot of heart to it, but it's also really funny with an incredible supporting cast, including a great surprise supporting performance by Dustin Hoffman. I really want to rewatch this soon. I don't know when this is coming out, as it is a surprise. I presume it's the start of next year. It's a really good mesh of genres. There's a bit of action, a bit of comedy, a bit of drama. I think that it's most akin to Roofman, which comes out soon, in that kind of style where it is, may perhaps be marketed more as a comedy, but it does still have a lot of heart at the centre of it. I think alongside Knives Out, this is probably my biggest recommend to everyone watching this. It's very accessible, it's very fun, and I can see it being a hit once it eventually hits cinemas and streaming later this year or in the start of next year. The next day, I started it off at 8 a.m. by watching Begonia, which was quite a lot for 8 a.m. in the morning. This follows Michelle Fuller, a successful CEO played by Emma Stone, who is kidnapped and held prisoner by two conspiracy theorists who believe she may be an alien intent on destroying Earth. This is Yorgos Lanthimos' next film. He's pumping them out pretty much one a year at this point, and it is such a wild ride. In terms of his filmography, there's still a few that I need to see, but this is probably my second favourite after Poor Things. It took me a little while to click with it, as it feels very small scale in comparison to something like Poor Things. But once I got into the groove of it, I really, really enjoyed it. Really interesting dialogue, especially with Emma Stone trying to kind of negotiate her way out of the situation, kind of playing into their insecurities, but it reaches a point where the audience is starting to doubt it as well. That's all I'll say without going into spoilers. I feel like it flew by. I believe it's just under 2 hours, but it felt much shorter than that, which was great. And Jesse Plemons, man, if you ever want a weird, kooky, insane guy in your film that really puts audiences on edge, then Jesse Plemons is the man for the job. Everything he's in, he's such a wild card, which is an amazing quality to make audiences really not sure where he's going to go. Like with his role in Civil War last year, as Todd in Breaking Bad, and as one of the conspiracy theorists in this. I haven't heard much Oscar buzz around his performance, but I think there definitely should be. He should absolutely be in contention to be Best Supporting Actor. I think him and Emma Stone's performances really elevate this to being a much better movie than it potentially could have been if it was with slightly weaker actors. I believe this is already out, but if it's not out, it'll be out in a few days when this episode releases. So yeah, go and check out Yorgos Lanthimos' new film, Begonia. After that, again in a massive contrast, I saw Jay Kelly. George Clooney plays Jay Kelly, a globally renowned film star who abandons his work to pursue spending time with one of his daughters on a trip across Europe. My main thought as soon as it ended was that this was such an Oscar-worthy Adam Sandler performance, kind of Trojan horsed inside a really nice George Clooney film, That may sound a bit cynical, but I think that Adam Sandler as the supporting in this is as good, if not better, than George Clooney in the lead. They both do an amazing job, but I think there's a lot of unspoken depth to Adam Sandler's character and what he's having to juggle in this supporting role. The film itself is really funny and endearing, and I think it's actually really continued to grow on me the more I think about it. Tonally and almost stylistically, this feels very similar to The Fabelmans, I think, where there is levity in it and it is very wholesome and endearing, but there is also a bit of a sadness at the core as well. There's some really heartfelt standout scenes, mostly involving small flashback vignettes. There's amazing score by Nicholas Brittle, who was the composer from Succession, and I didn't realise also Andor. It all comes together for a very nice, neat package that I think will be very accessible to a lot of people. I can see this doing very well in award season, and as it's a Netflix film, I believe it'll be coming to Netflix by the end of the year. So again, another really easy recommend to anyone listening to this and anyone's friends and family looking for a nice film to stick on over Christmas. I recommend J. Kelly. And to round off that day, I watched the 4K restoration of Hotel London. This film, initially released in 1987, it follows a Bangladeshi couple struggling with their living conditions as they're placed in a disruptive bed and breakfast while awaiting their accommodation arrangements. The film itself I found to be very slow and it didn't fully work for me, but it's definitely very thought-provoking. It's interesting but also scathing to see how society's progressed so little over the last 38 years, but also interesting to see how behaviours and mannerisms and attitudes have evolved but ultimately stayed very similar. Technically, as a restoration, I thought it did a great job. I thought it was very cool to see a film print restored so well. It looked great and it sounded great. On the second to last day of the festival, I started it off with It Was Just an Accident. This won the Palme d'Or at Cannes earlier this year. This follows family man Eqbal, who's kidnapped by a man who thinks he's actually his previous captor, but is not 100% sure. Thus ensues a winding tale of him trying to identify this man for certain. That sounds like a very confusing concept, but I'm sort of being vague not to spoil what this film really becomes. It's something really unique. I thought it was compelling from start to finish, with brilliantly written characters that gradually open up about their trauma and motivations for wanting to see this mission through. And it explores how everyone deals with traumatic events in different ways, some through anger, some with more deeply burrowed resentment, some with forgiveness, but they all want justice ultimately, but the ends to the means differ. I'd say this was a sleeper hit for me in that it was one of the ones that I wasn't most anticipating watching, but obviously it having the reputation of winning the Palme d'Or at Cannes, obviously it is a very good film. I know this is going to be very hotly contested in the Best International Film feature at the Oscars this year, but I think it's got a very strong chance. This is the first film I've seen by the director, Jafar Panahi, but again it just goes to show the power of a strong script. This film is just 6 people, with perhaps a few on the fringes, but it is a core cast of 6 people, and the script truly carries it. Okay, then after that, I watched Hamnet. This is an adaptation of a novel of the same name. Hamnet is the true story of William Shakespeare and his wife Anne Hathaway dealing with the loss of one of their children. I think Hamnet's been my most anticipated film of the year, and it's hands down one of the best. Before I even went to the festival, if I could have seen any of the big Gala films, this was the number one on my hit list. This is the film I wanted to watch, and I'm so pleased to say it is the best thing that I saw. This is overwhelmingly strong performances, paired with a stirring score by Max Richter, helmed by Chloe Zhao in such a masterful capacity. This is hands down her best film as a director so far. This was heart-shattering, complex, cathartic. I know I'm just throwing describing words at you about this, but it's such a moving film that I've got so much I want to talk about. This is undoubtedly going to be one of the best few films that I see this year, so I'm going to be talking about it down the line in my end of the year ranking film video. But yeah, I'll kind of scratch the surface now. I thought that Paul Mescal has been a one-of-a-kind actor back when I first saw Aftersun for the first time a few years ago, and he just proves again here how he can embody such a deep sadness so effectively. It's a very subtle performance, I guess coming off the back of things he's done last year in cinemas of Gladiator 2, it shows that he is such a good character actor. But Jessie Buckley is the show stealer here, in what I think is easily the best actress performance of the year. There's such raw emotions. She throws the kitchen sink at this. It is literally everything is just all on display. It feels so personal, so raw, so human. Yeah, it was devastating to watch in some scenes. You could hear the audience sobbing. Everyone was in bits during this screening, and it felt weirdly cathartic, like a sort of shared trauma, and that everyone was so clearly moved by the same emotional beats on the screen. This led to lots of discussion afterwards, and I can't wait to keep discussing it furthermore throughout the rest of the year. So this is coming out in the end of November in the US and at the start of January in the UK. So there's a little bit of a wait for this one. But when it comes out, you've got to see this. It's a heavy watch and it's hard. And if anyone's dealing with any quite raw grief, it could be quite upsetting, just with how realistic it is. But I think it is the biggest recommend I could give, and it is the best film that I saw at London Film Festival this year. And to round off the day, I watched Supernature. This was the only documentary that I got to see as part of the festival. It's a collaborative documentary filmed, I believe, by 25 filmmakers around the world, all shot on Super 8 cameras, capturing a really unique view of our natural world. It was really cool to see a documentary like this, kind of like a patchwork project with lots of personal vignettes culminating to present a broad look at the natural world. It made me grin constantly. I think there's something so special about capturing these animal behaviours in a medium that's so precious and fleeting as Super 8. Like putting it in an underwater housing, filming from a paraglider, finding ways to achieve modern camera techniques on vintage film. It's just so cool. And I found it actually to be very creatively inspiring. I've actually been working on a new wildlife documentary of my own over this last year. I've had a bit of a creative burnout with it over the past 6 months, whereas watching this made me actually feel somewhat reinvigorated towards that project. So hats off to that. This made me feel very motivated and inspired. I believe this is going to be having a cinema release next year, which is incredibly exciting. And I'm actually hoping to chat to the director of the film, Ed, at some point closer to that time. So I guess it will be sort of the middle portion of next year, but keep an eye out for an episode of that because I can't wait to dedicate a whole episode to chatting about Supernature. I thought it was a really special watch and it was a real surprise to me of how impressive this was. Okay, then on the last day of the festival, I started off by watching The Choral. This has Ray Fiennes playing a choral conductor in Yorkshire during the First World War. He musters together a village choir amidst the ever-changing environment due to the war and conscriptions. This is a jolly little feel-good British flick. It really embodies like a mum and a dad film, the type of film that you'd watch on a Sunday evening after tea. It's very inoffensive, patriotic, and a pretty good all-round period piece. This isn't going to break any new ground and move any mountains, but I'm also not going to say it's bog standard. It's just a very nice, well-rounded film. It's also cool to see some actors that I haven't seen in a good while, like Bobby B, Robert Baratheon himself, as well as a few great newcomers. I do wish there was a bit more conflict. I wish they elaborated more on Ray Fiennes' character, would have elevated it to the next level and made it a little bit more impressive. After that, I saw Sentimental Value. When Gustav, a film director played by Stellan Skarsgård, re-enters his daughter's lives, they wrestle with their upbringing amidst their father's fame and reflect on their family dynamics. I got very lost, in a good way, in how this film really unpacks their family relationship. It shows how, despite frustrations and complications, a lot can be worked through when there's love at the centre. This is really funny at times, and that's mostly driven by Stellan Skarsgård's wit and delivery of his lines, who, by the way, is unsurprisingly insanely good in this. It's kind of a supporting role, but he's also the driving force behind the story, and it's also the first Joan Trier film that I've seen. I've been meaning to watch Worst Person in the World for so long, it's on my watch list, but I'm absolutely keen to see more. Admittedly, I was really tired when I saw this at the end of the week, but I still really enjoyed it and I'm looking forward to rewatching it later this year. And the last film that I saw in an in-person screening this year is H is for Hawk. Following the death of her father, Helen, played by Claire Foy, decides to take on a goshawk as a means for her to deal with her grief and discover some companionship. This was another surprise hit. I really liked this. This was one of the Gala films, but it had a very small amount of discussion around it. I only chatted to a few people about this, didn't seem to be on many people's radars. It always baffles me how well-trained animal actors can be, and hats off to Claire Foy for also acting alongside her. Seeing a bird of prey being able to act so well to commands on camera was really impressive. This film again shows how everyone deals with grief in different ways. In this instant though, finding solace and partnership in a relationship with a pet. But it's also a bit more than that. It's not just a pet, it is definitely companionship. She sees a lot of herself in this hawk. I don't know whether that's through projecting or through actual behavioural similarities, but I think it was a really interesting relationship that they explored. The film also does a really good job of showing how obsessions can quite quickly spiral, and that how taking a step back can actually show that it is becoming a little bit unhealthy. This is another one that I can see becoming a British film that catches on with a lot of people. So keep an eye out for this when it comes to cinemas, I presume at the start of next year. Right, so that was the 19 films that I saw at the in-person screenings. Then on the streaming platform, I also watched another 3 more. The first of this was Love, Brooklyn. A New York writer called Roger, played by Andre Holland, navigates 2 complicated relationships with his ex-girlfriend and current lover. The more time you spend with these characters and understand these relationships, the more and more compelling it becomes. I think it's very tight, naturalistic dialogue. I guess you'd classify this more as a dramedy. It's definitely not a rom-com. It combines comedy elements with quite a serious story at its heart, navigating tricky relationships at this point in someone's life, trying to find a relationship that's healthy and works both ways for the two people involved. I really like the setting, obviously with it being called Love Brooklyn. It's very interesting to see Brooklyn like this, in contrast to the hustle and bustle of the rest of New York. It feels like a real love letter to this location, putting a very focused spotlight on this community of artists and the people that live and work there. Next up, I watched Ish. Two teenage boys have their friendship tested through the racial profiling challenges that present themselves in their daily lives in the UK. This was pretty powerful in showing the world from a perspective of a teenage boy and how impactful a rift in friendship can be. It can be completely devastating and flip someone's world upside down, losing that friend that's really close to them. The whole film is shot in black and white, and I actually think it was a really great use of black and white. I think it was an active choice rather than a passive choice, particularly later on in the film. Without spoiling too much, there's a fireworks scene, and the use of lighting in that scene especially is very, very effective. And similar to what I watched earlier in the festival, The Sun and the Sea, it feels very uniquely British. I'd actually be fascinated to know what international audiences think of this. And the last film that I watched was Diamonds in the Sand. Following the loss of his mother, a common working man called Yoji toils with his loneliness and decides to embark on an adventure of sorts. This was a very subtle film that kind of sneaks up on you. Discussing it with a friend at the festival, it feels like the second half of the film is very different tonally than the first half. I found there to be some similarities to Perfect Days in that how it follows a similar protagonist going about his daily working life. It deals with a lot of uniquely Japanese societal issues, in particular kodakushi, which is referred to as lonely death, a phenomenon where people unfortunately pass away on their own and often go undiscovered for days. The film explores this issue particularly in a sensitive but quite impactful way, and while there's a lot of heavy themes in this around this issue, it is balanced out quite well by some of the more light-hearted nature of the second half. I was actually very lucky enough to record interviews with Rachel Abigail Holder, the director of Love Brooklyn, and Janice Victoria, the director of Diamonds in the Sand. I'll be dedicating a separate episode to each of these in the coming weeks, so stay tuned for those. Okay, that was everything that I watched at London Film Festival 2025. Sorry that was a lot of talking. This is by far the longest solo episode I've done, so I'll shut up in a minute. But before I go, I've got to do a little bit of ranking, of course. It's kind of hard to rank these, as I really liked the vast majority of everything that I saw. So my top 10, starting at number 10, would be It Was Just an Accident. At number 9, The Voice of Hind Rajab. Number 8, Jay Kelly. Number 7, The Sun and the Sea. Number 6, Sentimental Value. Number 5, the mystery film Tuna. Number 4, Supernature. Number 3, Train Dreams. Number 2, Wake Up Dead Man, a Knives Out mystery. And number 1, unsurprisingly, Hamnet. In terms of Letterboxd ranking, everything that I've just mentioned is between a 4 and a 5 star. There were so many incredible films that I was fortunate enough to watch, and this ranking is just anecdotal, my preference, but any of these could be anyone's number 1, and I'm looking forward to recommending and rewatching pretty much all of these when they're released, either later this year or at the start of next year. Even now, a week and a half after the festival, some of them already started to grow on me, as I mentioned, Jay Kelly and Begonia, and while I think that Hamnet was definitely the best thing that I saw, it is quite a heavy watch and will be quite a hard rewatch, but I think the most entertaining films I saw were definitely Wake Up Dead Man and Tuna. And the last thing I want to wrap it up with is a little bit of Oscar conversation. With pretty much all the heavy hitters now released or releasing, apart from, I guess, Marty Supreme and Wicked for Good and Avatar Fire and Ash, it's at the point now where people can start to make some loose predictions and long list prediction type things. Ballad of a Small Player, despite me not liking it much at all, I wouldn't mind if it got a cinematography nomination. I thought the cinematography was actually really strong, and it was one of the most visually striking films I've seen this year. For Best International Film, I think it's kind of a two-horse race between Sentimental Value and It Was Just an Accident at the moment. I'm not too sure when Tuna is releasing, the surprise film, but I think it had some of the best editing and sound design I've seen in years, so I would love that to have nominations in both those categories respectively. I'd also love Rian Johnson to get a nomination for Best Original Screenplay, and hell, even maybe Best Director for Knives Out 3. And lastly, in terms of acting, Jessie Buckley's got Best Actress in the bag for Hamnet. I'd love to see Joel Edgerton and George Clooney maybe get nominations for Best Actor, and maybe even Adam Sandler to get a Best Supporting Actor nomination too. And we're done. Sorry if that was a little bit rambly. I had a lot of thoughts to get through for a week at a film festival. I absolutely loved this, and again, thank you very much to the delegates team at London Film Festival for allowing me to come for a week to see a lot of amazing films and to put together reviews like this. As I mentioned, I was very fortunate to record interviews with the directors of both Love Brooklyn and Diamonds in the Sands. They'll be releasing as their own separate episodes in the coming weeks, and I've also got 1 or 2 other episodes lined up in the pipeline too. So yeah, thank you very much for listening to this episode of the Home Screen Podcast. If you've enjoyed it, please give us a follow, leave a rating, and all of our social media links should be in the episode descriptions. And until next time, take care. Bye.